For 11 days, the single most important aircraft in the entire American air campaign sat out in the open at a desert base, visible to any satellite eye, and nothing happened. Then, on the 14th day, 5 of those same planes were struck in a single devastating blow. Why wait? That unanswered pause is the real mystery, and it may be the key to a far bigger, far darker strategy. On day 14, ballistic missiles slammed into Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia, and early damage reports showed 5 KC-135 Stratotankers hit while parked on the tarmac. Those tankers aren't glamorous. They're the lifeblood of long-range air operations, the flying fuel stations that let jets reach targets thousands of kilometers away. Without them, bomber and fighter missions shrink from bold, long-range strikes to awkward, fuel-starved sorties. But this story didn't begin with the missiles hitting the ground. It started days earlier in the sky. A KC-135 operating over the region crashed under murky circumstances. 6 crew members were killed, and a pro-Iran militia claimed responsibility, saying the aircraft had been targeted in Iraqi airspace. At first glance, the crash looked like an accident. Viewed with the missile strike that followed, it becomes part of a troubling pattern. First, demonstrate tankers can be struck in flight. Then, prove they are not safe even when sheltered on Allied soil. What looks like a coincidence begins to look deliberate. That deliberate sequence hints at a phased campaign, a campaign that goes after the logistical backbone of an air war instead of its most visible machines. Rehook, stay with me. The consequences of that choice ripple far beyond a single base. KC-135. Stratotankers are large, slow, and crucially predictable. They use established flight corridors, concentrate at known rendezvous points, and deploy from identifiable airfields. They aren't stealthy, they're fuel trucks in the sky, and that makes them an obvious target for an adversary willing to think systemically. Destroying a frontline fighter costs lives and prestige. Undermining the refueling network can derail entire campaigns with fewer, more strategic strikes. Within a week, the refueling network supporting American operations reportedly suffered multiple setbacks. Crashes, suspected attacks, and the missile strike that wounded tankers on the ground. Some estimates point to as many as 7 aerial refueling aircraft lost or damaged in that short window, and several forward-deployed KC-135s were among them. Those forward assets were not incidental. They were positioned specifically to sustain repeated strike operations deep inside Iranian territory. With them gone or dispersed, planners faced an immediate operational headache. Where else do you base the fuel birds without exposing them to the same danger? Remaining tankers were forced to relocate, dispersed across multiple airfields, and pushed farther from the front lines, a defensive move that brings its own penalties. Rehook. What happens when logistics slows down? The whole air campaign feels it, and you're about to see why that matters politically and economically. Moving tankers farther out lengthened rendezvous points, increased transit times, and tightened fuel margins for fighters like the F-35 that rely heavily on mid-air refueling for long-range missions. Mission planning suddenly required new legs, new support aircraft, and narrower timing windows, all of which raise risk, cost, and complexity. Every detour, every extra mile chips away at the tempo of operations and the ability to execute precise, repeatable strike packages. For an adversary seeking to raise the cost of a campaign, that friction may be the point. Not to win a knockout battle, but to make every future strike slower, riskier, and more expensive. This is asymmetric pressure in practice, a strategy that mixes missile strikes, proxy attacks, and targeted hits on economic arteries to stretch the opponent thin. One of those arteries is the Strait of Hormuz, a narrow choke point that carries a massive share of the world's traded oil. Even limited disruptions there, mines, drone shadowing, attacks on commercial shipping, can ripple through global markets within hours. Reports of naval mines, drone surveillance of cargo, and attacks on vessels have already forced some operators to reroute or delay, and insurance premiums for the region have spiked. The market response is fast. Traders price in risk, oil ticks up, and governments watching supply chains start to feel domestic pressure. Rehook. The tactical choice to hit tankers ties directly into a broader strategy of squeezing economies and fracturing alliances. Keep listening. From Tehran's perspective, threatening the logistics that support strikes and the shipping lanes that fuel economies creates political strain inside the coalition arrayed against it. Every economic shock, higher fuel prices, shipping delays, insurance spikes, pushes domestic constituencies to question the cost of continued military pressure. The objective may not be battlefield annihilation. It could be erosion of coalition resolve, one economic wound at a time. That shift in focus, from direct battlefield engagements to systemic vulnerability attacks, exposes a structural weak point in modern air warfare. Air power has long assumed a safe logistical rear where tankers could orbit and operate out of harm's way. That assumption is now being tested. If the aerial refueling network becomes contested, militaries worldwide will need to rethink basing strategies, dispersal, and layered protection for support aircraft. We could see new defensive doctrines, specialized protection systems for tankers, and deeper contingency planning for long-range missions. Rehook. If logistics become the battleground, the shape of future wars, and the cost of projecting power changes dramatically. Don't blink now. For decades, tankers were essential but relatively invisible. They were the unsung enablers behind every headline strike. The recent sequence, a crash in the air, missile strikes on parked tankers, and subsequent dispersal, forces military planners to grapple with a new reality. The backbone can be the target, and when the backbone is contested, the entire edifice of power projection is shaken, from tactical sortie rates to strategic deterrence calculations. The ripple effects reach markets, politics, and public patience. Longer missions, higher costs, and the political fallout that comes when economies feel the squeeze. So return to the question we opened with, why wait for 11 days and then strike on day 14? That pause may have been tactical, psychological, or strategic, and it may have been meant to prove a single point. Nothing that supports the air campaign is untouchable. The full implications are still unfolding, and every new incident should be read not just as a battlefield event, but as a potential turning point for how air power and economic pressure intersect. If you want to understand how these tactical moves translate into real political and market consequences, follow this thread, because the next development could change planning rooms and trading floors alike. If this breakdown helped you see the links between a single missile strike and global ripple effects, hit subscribe to Market Mindset, like the video, share it with someone who follows defense or markets, and drop your opinion in the comments. I want to hear what you think the next move will be.